guys. Today we're going to be talking about my personal 7 year transformation in the gym, 7 years onwards. The before and after you can see in the thumbnail there, and you can also see it here on the bottom side of the screen there for you guys. That's just going to be running through some pictures from 2018 and 2019. You know, back in the day, the OG pictures when I was a few months in, or the first year in, still making those newbie gains. But I was looking through the before and afters because I just recently had a photo shoot taken last Tuesday with Alex Whitman. It went really well in Ickleston. It's nice to get some pictures of myself where, professional lighting, a bit of a fake tan. I'm halfway through the cut, 5 weeks in. I've got another 5 weeks to go. For the photo shoot, I didn't do any water manipulation or carb manipulation or anything like that. So it's definitely not the exact best shape I could be in. Another 5 weeks, and then something like that, down the road, we could get some even better visuals. But I'm pretty happy with the way that they all turned out. And the before and after, it screams, quite a drastic change. It's from 50 kilos when I started. I was about 48 kilos. A few months in, I made it to 50. And now I'm sitting comfortably at around 105 kilos. Body weight, even with the abs visible. So nice and lean, which is good. We're looking forward to making more and more progress. But what we're talking about is the history, the transformation, what actually achieved it. And I have here with me, it's not light anymore. It used to just be in a big pile, but we've got this binder, which it's pretty rammed with old notebooks. I've cut out all of the pages that were old and didn't have any gym relevant information. So some of those notebooks had scribbles and doodles in and stuff not related to the gym, so they've gone. The covers of the notebooks have been taken off, so it's just raw pages of workout logs, diet logs, training logs, all from the sort of first 5 years I was training. I'll show you that there again on the side there. All of that is my logs, and then for the last 2 years it's all been online because I find it much easier to do it all online on my phone here instead. On the phone I've got access to things like Google Sheets, Google Docs, note apps, chronometer for calorie tracking, and workout tracking apps. And sometimes I just track stuff in messages between myself, message myself things back and forth, and it's become a lot easier. So those notebooks, I do still, I hold on to them. They're special. There's probably, I couldn't tell you how many pages, but 5 years worth of workout logs and diet logs. And in those first 5 years I was training pretty much 7 days a week for the first 5 years. I think I've missed, maybe in those first 5 years, less than 5 workouts, as in I would have trained 7 days a week and would have only missed 5 due to sickness or injury. And then recently, as I trained for 6 days a week, 5 days a week sometimes, as part of the program, I don't think I've missed a single day. But that's kind of, just the way it goes with the consistency. I don't think I've missed a single day. In the last 2 years, I've not missed a single meal ever in the whole time I've been at the gym. I've never had a meal that I've planned to eat that I've for some reason not eaten. Never skipped a meal, never missed a meal. In the last year, I don't think, certainly since 2025 rolled around, I've not eaten anything that's not on plan, that isn't, something I've cooked and put in a Tupperware and weighed out and know everything there is ins and outs wise of. So there's that. That's probably, the main reason for the transformation in the first place, the consistency, the fact that I've not missed workouts, the fact that I've not missed meals, the fact that I've kept everything tracked and traced. And if you're measuring things, you're managing things, you've got control of things. If it's not being measured, it's not being managed, as Chris Bumstead said. So this, all of that is important. It might seem a little bit unhealthy, but I think it's the exact opposite, because the pursuit of health is sort of part of it, and tracking your calories and your exercises is all going to make being healthier easier and consistent easier, because if you're inconsistent, it's quite hard to tell what brings on the changes. But in those logbooks, I looked through them, all of them, actually, not every single page, but the vast majority of the time I would write down when I was changing my splits or my programs or my diets, certain food sources, certain things here and there. And I can actually see that across the whole 7 years that I've trained, there is actually still some things that I did when I started that I do now. Even though there's plenty of mistakes that I no longer do, like obvious things, the things that go without saying that you're not supposed to do that I did, like train for 4 hours a day and eat zero carbs, which is what my initial program was, no carbs, so ketogenic, 4 hours a day. So it was it was quite intense. Pretty bad for muscle building though. But newbie gains found a way. I mean, the pictures here on the side. I'm clearly not. I'm clearly not him. I'm not Juan. But that's what 4 hours and no carbs does to a man in their teens. 15, 16 years old. Um, but I see exercises and variations of those exercises because I've trained in the same gym for these 7 years. It's been Evo the whole time. Other than there was a little moment where I was working in an industrial estate and training in the gym that was in the industrial estate, and then going to work afterwards in the industrial estate. So it was easier to walk to the gym, train, then walk to work instead of going all over the place to still train at Evo. But those are the times, Evo 7 years consistently, it's had the same bits of kit, the exact same machines to progress on. It's had the same sort of plates, weights, everything. It's all stayed relatively the same. So, what kind of things has a man been doing for 7 years in a row that I still do? The lat pull down. That lat pull down has been there since day one, and I don't think there's been back days really ever where I've not had that lat pull down in some variation of close grip, medium grip, wide grip, or underhand grip. And as I've trained and I know what I like, it's now either close grip like that, underhand grip like that, or the motorbike handles like that. Nothing else will do. Wide grip I feel is awful, and anything other than that, close grip or underhand grip or the motorbike handle grip is just rubbish. So those have stayed in lat pull downs for 7 years. So if you want to know how to get the back I have, it's clearly lat pull downs. No, but in all seriousness, if I were to make a list of the exercises that have stayed the same, it's the compounds and the fundamentals. There's always been some form of a bench press of kinds, even though I've had so many pec injuries I can't even name them. I think it's 10 on one side and 8 on the other, and I now have like a little mutant pec on my left where the tissue is supposed to like run this way like that nicely, and when you see me pose, I have a little pocket of tissue that's not grown back, so it sort of runs vertically instead of at this angle. It runs like that. So if you see me do the flexing, that pec kind of goes off to the side a bit. But I can't press anymore at all really. So all my chest training is flies and dips, and then very gentle, very light pressing. Like high reps 20 and onwards. But I'm not doing any heavy pressing anymore. But for the majority of my pec building, it was bench pressing and incline pressing, dumbbells, barbells, Smith machine. I don't feel like I ever progressively overloaded as much as those exercises, but maybe I did it later on when I was stronger anyway. Lat pull downs for the back, those have stayed in for 7 years, looking at all of those logbooks and all the stuff from my phone. Some form of a hip hinge, like a deadlift or an RDL. I've pretty much always done those, other than the time I hurt my lower back. Like 5 years ago, I pulled my left QL and I bruised something in my back. I can't remember what the exact terminology was. It wasn't a hernia. It wasn't like a disc slip or a rupture, but it was just a really, really bad day. And I couldn't do deadlifts, but they've always stayed in some kind. Squats haven't always been there. So if I was going to attribute anything to my legs, it wouldn't be squats, because I've done squats a lot, and I've done hack squats sometimes, squats other times, no squats, no hack squats, and just sort of the extensions and the curls. Sometimes that's because of the problems with the lower back from the injury. Sometimes it's when I'm really deep on a cut, all of those axial loading things, I can't do them properly or heavy, so I just switch to more isolation based things. But in terms of legs, I've always done extensions, seated leg extensions. I've always done curls, lying leg curls, hamstring curls. I've always done seated hamstring curls. I've always done plenty of shoulder flies, with the dumbbells. I've always done cable shoulder flies, sort of like, if we're looking at like the bread and butter exercises that I'm going to carry on doing that I've already been doing for 7 years, it's not like an excessive list of things. You wouldn't need to, you wouldn't need more than a couple dumbbells and a couple cable machines to get it done, really. So when I go into that gym, there's loads and loads of bits of kit, but when I look at every workout I do, I'm either pulling up a bench in front of the cable cross stack to do some form of you know, bench supported cable, something like a cable press or a cable row or a cable fly or a cable pull down or a cable pull over. You know, I'm just using that cable machine, the free formed cable that can go either way, not the machine based cable machines that are fixed. I'm using the more robust. I don't know. It just seems like that's the way everything's gone in my training. I'm always on those cables, the ones where you can move up and down on the cross cable machine to do, you know, presses on both sides, rows on both sides, rows on either side, all of those sorts of things. I'm always going over to pick something heavy up off the floor, like a deadlift, or an RDL, or a stiff leg deadlift, or a trap bar deadlift, or some kind of barbell bent over row. There's been times in my training where bent over rows have been too taxing on my back, but at the moment I'm pretty much smashing like the lower back stuff, all the stuff I always thought was too axially loading. I'm doing RDLs on one session, I'm doing bent over rows on a back session, and I'm doing deadlifts on a leg session. So I mean that's 3 lots of axial loading because of that injury on the adductor when I pulled that. My hips are pretty crammed at the moment, pretty bad. So the squatting is not back in program yet, but it will be coming back. I will be doing some form of hack squat or safety bar squat or regular bow bar back squat or front squat. Some squats will be coming back. Probably tomorrow. You know, starting. You know, everyone. Oh, you see tomorrow. You got no tomorrow to start with, but starting tomorrow, we'll definitely put back in. You know, start with a bar on my back and 60 kilos on my back, 100 kilos, 140. Just go up from there and see how much we can squat again. Bulgarian split squats, those are going to have to come back. Those were good leg builders when I had them in, and I only had them for a little bit, and then I hurt myself doing them. So clearly, I rushed the weight up. It's the injury, new movement pattern. Whoopsie doo. Everything else, I feel like that I've not done the whole time I've been doing 7 years. I feel like I've changed it out and switched it out because it wasn't hitting as much as like doing stuff free weights or with cables. There's always, you know, like a plate loaded machine or a pin loaded machine that's fixed to do one specific movement, like a fixed. It's a machine that can only be a row type of thing with a handle and a pin and a cable. I feel like I've never kept those in for the 7 years I've done it, other than with the lat pull down. And maybe that's just a case with the machines we have. There's not enough of them. I don't like all of them, or whatever. But it seems to me like they're just too strict. They're too supported. There's not enough freedom of how you can move them, so you can like really feel the muscles. That's kind of what I'd say is the most important consistent part to build the mind muscle connection, to be able to do stuff with your muscles, is to be able to move them and not have the, you know, the full movement pattern already decided by the machine or the bit of kit you're on. That might be why I'm not a big fan of the Smith machine, because it's already fixed. I like exercises that are really braced, as in you've got lots of control. You've got your feet firmly on the floor, you've got your back firmly on a bench, or your chest firmly on a bench, and you're not going to, you know, move anywhere, but the weight that you do move can go anywhere, if that makes sense. As in you're stuck, fixed, braced, core tight, legs strong on the floor, but you could pull that weight anywhere. So when you're doing a cable row, you know, a bench supported cable row, but it's not a cable machine 4 rows, it's a free cable. The cable, you can pull that cable all the way out, or you can pull the cable all the way down, or you can pull the cable all the way in and tuck around, and there's like so much freedom of movement that you can actually contract and squeeze and feel the muscle the whole way through. So that's kind of, as I've trained for this long, I feel like the most important thing is being able to properly stretch out the muscle, you know, feel the muscle stretch out, but not just commit to doing like body language where you move to make greater range of motion. You actually stretch the muscle, and you don't then move to make more range. You just stretch until the muscle can't go any further, and then you pull back and you squeeze until the muscle can't go any further. And it's not about this sort of like super long movement arm where you're creating it by just actually moving away from things and moving backwards to do things. As in, you're just like the easiest example is with a cable row. There's no point then twisting to get further into the stretch because your back is already fully lengthened, and there's no point twisting outwards again to shorten, because once you're in and tucked, you're already fully shortened. So a lot of, if you were to just look at my training, it might not look like the huge range of motion you see some people do when they talk about emphasizing the stretch and the squeeze, but the muscles are fully lengthening and fully contracting. I'm just not doing any body language to do it, so each rep is very consistent. And that's the way I like to train now, and that's the way I'm going to keep training. Moving forward, we talked about what have we done the last 7 years in terms of training. Moving forward in terms of dieting, where are we now? I mean, we're doing something I was not doing 2 years ago, 1 year ago, 3, 4, 5, 6 years ago. What I'm doing now is carb cycling and calorie cycling in a way that sort of came to me out of necessity and experimentation, and sort of like, how do I do this? I was basically at a point in my last cut where I was there like, how do I lower my carbs but not have like this tiny little pre-workout and tiny little post-workout meal, because I was just sort of chipping everything off of every meal, and every meal was gradually getting smaller and smaller and smaller. And I was like, well, the last meal of the day, I don't really need carbs, so just instead of lowering all of the meals slowly like that, I was like, oh, the last meal of the day, shoop, just take them all out, and everything else can stay, everything else can stay nice and high, but that last meal's got no carbs. And then I thought, well, the second to last meal I can do the same, and the meal before that I can do the same. So I'm now only really eating carbs before I train. I'm drinking carbs and eating carbs when I train. Dextrose, multidextrin, cyclic dextrin, and then I'm eating carbs after I train. And then for the rest of the day, I'm just eating fats and proteins and vegetables. So obviously vegetables have some carbs in, and they've got some fiber, and they sort of fill you up a bit. But it's like, in the past, I used to be eating like, oats and whey pre-workout, I'm pretty sure was the go-to in all of these logbooks. Oats and whey and some sort of like fruit in there, oats, bananas, whey, peanut butter, raisins, berries. And now I'm just doing rice, berries, bananas, whey, and stuff like that. That's my pre-workout, is rice, whey, loads of fruit and berries and bananas. No fats. I don't do fats pre, intra, or post-workout, because they are, they mess around with the digestion, they slow it down, and they muck around with the insulin sensitivity. And loads of carbs and fats together do make you fat, is unfortunately the way. So if you're having loads of fats, you do need to have no carbs in that meal. If you're having loads of carbs, you need to have no fats in that meal, is what I've sort of figured my body is best at in the last, playing around with the carb cycle and business. But basically, there's only 3 meals a day where I do eat carbs at the moment. And then the ones after that, post workout, pre-bed and pre-bed meal, no carbs. It's just chicken and veg, or nuts and a shake. Basically, those are the meals. It's not very, it's not very creative. It doesn't seem very healthy. It doesn't seem very colourful. But between the pre-workout and the post-workout, which is, a ton of rice, some whey, some fish, a bunch of veg, a bunch of fruit, I mean, I'm getting in, I think if I look at it, I get 11 portions of fruit or veg in a day, between the broccoli, the spinach, the pineapple, the beetroot, the tomatoes, the strawberries, blueberries, raspberries, bananas. Is there any other fruits I eat? Sometimes mango, to be fair, sometimes kiwi, sometimes oranges, but like the main ones that are in the plan are berries, bananas, the fruits, and then beetroots and pineapples and tomatoes and all of those sorts of things. And it just makes the carbs really easy to get in. It makes when you cut really easy to do, because you've only got 3 meals where you need to worry about carbs, and those are the only ones where you need to put them away from. So that's how my day's carbs look. And then in terms of my week's carbs, on the day I don't train, which is a Sunday, I just do a protein sparing modified fast. So I just only eat meat, no carbs, just meat. So now I've got, one day where I've got no carbs in the picture. So those carbs can now be split and divvied across the other 6 days where I do train. So now instead of, all of the days being the same, I've got one day which is lower and all of the other days which can be slightly higher. And then sometimes when I'm, pushing the food up a bit more, I'll have the leg days be extra high carbs. So I'll take, all of the days the same. I'll have the protein sparing modified fast on the day I don't train. Even on the off season, I'll do that. When I'm trying to gain weight, so all of the ships are higher. And then on the days which aren't leg days, I'll take a little bit off there and put them both onto the leg days. So the push and the pull day, some of those carbs will go to the leg day. The other push and the pull day, some of those carbs will go to the other leg day. So when I do my carb calculations, I will calculate it based on my body weight, X number of grams per X number of pounds, and then I will take one whole day off of that, and I will divide that by 7, and I will put that on all the days, and then on the days where I want even higher carbs, I basically just pinch from one day to put on the other. It's kind of how it works. You rob Peter to pay Paul kind of thing. Like literally, I'm just taking days from one thing to put on another thing. That's how my carb goes. But back in the day, the dieting was crazy. I was doing, nowadays I'm eating very low fats, very high carbs. Back in the day, it was the opposite. I was doing very high fats, high proteins, about the same amount of protein, really, to be fair, just different sources, not as healthy sources back then, I don't think, higher fat sources anyway. Like not lean cuts of red meat and avocados and eggs and all of those things to get quite a lot of fats in. I was eating like over 100 grams of fats on most of my earlier gaining phases. We're talking the first few years in the gym, and that didn't really, I mean, it translated to the scales and the strength. I mean, my strength was going up, my scale weight was going up, and I felt amazing and incredible. And I was like, obviously, I was going from skinny to bigger and bigger and bigger. So why would I not? But I was also going from skinny to fatter and fatter and fatter. So it's like, it's not all sunshine and rainbows. It wasn't all positive. It wasn't all good weight to gain. But now I know that, too much fat and too much carb doesn't mix. Too much protein, that is just a bit expensive, but it's not going to be, you know, destructive or deleterious to your physique. But too much carbs can be bad. Too much fats can be bad. Too much protein obviously can be bad. But once you've found the level where your digestion isn't, you're not got problems with the protein basically. If you know what I mean, you're fine. You get your fiber in, you get your micros in, you make sure that your digestion doesn't suck. And if you're got issues with digestion, you need to look at the sources of food. You need to possibly look at the timing of the food, the bolus. These massive bolus portions of food can always throw your digestion off. And sometimes when I am pushing the weight up and the pre-workout meal is just enormous, it feels a bit like a bit ridiculous to look at. Like, is this really one meal? Does this really work? But then you think about it, it's like, well, throughout the rest of the day, I'm not really eating that much in terms of big meals, so I've got far more free time to do work, to eat at work as well. Because I would just imagine it would be impossible to bring meals of that sort of size to work to eat, in Tupperwares. I'd need to bring like a salad bowl this big to work if I was eating that 3 times a day, and I just, my whole backpack would be food like that. So from a practicality standpoint, the big pre, the big intra, and the big post kind of works to make the other meals when you're not in the gym a bit smaller and a bit more manageable, to be fair. And also with your insulin sensitivity, I mean, it's going to help a great deal if you're doing your fasted cardio. You got your insulin sensitivity going up, and then because you're not smashing massive portions of carbs throughout the day, you've only got these big hits. Especially when you're most receptive to it post workout, the post workout glut for super compensation that I always talk about. Now you're not mucking up your insulin sensitivity as much because your body's ready. It's just trained. It needs refueling. So in that sense, it almost seems like there couldn't be a better time to eat loads of carbs than before you train, while you train, and after you train. Like, it wouldn't make any sense to do the pre-workout meal I do before I go to bed, because I would just be there like, bloated, waiting to train, and there'd be like, I'd have to go to sleep with all that blood in my guts. Like, it wouldn't happen. So that's sort of the way that the diet's moved from these. So like back in the day, as I say, it would be high fat content, red meat minces, rice, the same. A lot less vegetables than I have now. I was pretty much skimping on them. I'm not sure if that was out of like a budgeting thing, like I was trying to save money and eat less vegetables, or like a convenience thing, like it seemed like a hassle to then have to microwave vegetables or cook vegetables, or have vegetables in the freezer. But it seemed like my diet was a lot less colorful back when I was training earlier. And even though like I was eating way more food as well. The thing is, like, my peak off season calories this time was like just over 4,000, and I know that the most I've ever eaten was like 6.5 when I was gaining weight years ago. I didn't eat that much food back then because I wasn't that big. I don't eat that much food now, so there was like a clear trap I was falling into where I was just chasing scale weight, and I was chasing like a kilo a week of scale weight at some points, which is just unheard of nowadays. That's 2.205 pounds a week I'm at the moment. if an off season goes and I gain 5 kilos, that would be insane. So the fact that that would be 5 weeks, but back in the day, that would be 5 weeks for me, the 5 kilos. But nowadays, that would be like a year, maybe. I think I could gain 5 kilos in a year if I put my, grafting shoes on and I really tried to progressively overload and beat the logbook. I could probably put 5 kilos of tissue on. Not even tissue, just 5 kilos of weight that isn't bad. Like 5 kilos of good tissue would be my goal for a year. That was my goal for a month back in the day. That's how crazy that is to think, but it's just a case of rushing. So my transformation, the 7 years that we've done the learning, it seems like the most important thing that I've kind of learned is just to take my foot off the gas. Like, there is no way you can make this any faster than it is. There is no rush. It's really slow to build muscle, to create new tissue. The only limit to it is how much protein you can synthesize in a day, and that ceiling isn't that high, And then when you've got to maintain the muscle you already have, that ceiling is going lower and lower and lower, because you're now spending your protein to maintain the muscle you have, so you've got less left over to build new muscle. So it's like there's no way you're gaining a pound of muscle a week. So when your goal on your gaining phase, or your bulking phase, if you want to call it that, is to gain a pound, it's just not going to be a pound of good tissue. It's just going to be a pound that you're going to have to lose again. It sort of feels like the first 5 years of my training was a lot like, in an analogy, like digging a hole and then filling it up again, and just doing that over and over again. Like, I was gaining loads of weight, loads of fat, loads of water, a bit of muscle, and then I was having to strip it all back off. I was going to have to cut off all of this fat. I was doing these massively long cuts, really deep cuts, and by the end of the cut, I wasn't even lean, and then I was going right the way back up in weight, and then I was cutting again, and then by the end of that cut, I wasn't even lean, and I was going right the way back up. Like, I did that, I think, like 4 or 5 different times, where I did like this humongous bulk, just like the crazy dreamer bulk, bloat maxing as it's called. And then I would cut down, and by the end of the cut, I was probably just about ready to start a cut. Maybe, the cuts were clearly too short, they clearly weren't aggressive enough, and the bulks were clearly way too long and way too aggressive. So I just had the balance all wrong. And nowadays, I feel like I need my gaining phases to be really long, a big old runway, so I've got loads of time to progressively overload the movements, because the amount of weight I'm putting on in terms of lifts session to session is only going to be like a rep, a kilo, 2 kilos, 2 reps if I'm lucky, on most things. On some things, not on everything. It'll only be on a couple of things. I might tie the logbook on some things. I might not even tie the logbook on others if I'm fatigued at the end of the session and I've progressed earlier on in the session. Is how it goes. Sometimes I'll beat the first 3 movements of last week, and then I'll tie up on the next 2 movements, and then I'll lose out on the last couple because I've already spent all my dice on the work. So it's just a take your time thing. It really is a take your time thing. I feel like when I first started the gym, obviously the newbie gains, but I was doing everything wrong, but I was still making progress, and I was still seeing everyone making progress online. And it was like, I can do that. I can copy that. I'm working hard. Like, I'm training for 4 hours. I'm doing just what Arnold did, is what I would say to myself. The high fat, that all came from Arnold. The big sessions, that all came from Arnold. I was just copying what I saw online. And I thought, the harder you work, Rich Piana said, the more you put in, the more you get out. And I took that and I ran with it, and I misinterpreted it, because now I understand the real grit and the real hard part of the gym is progressively overloading session to session. Like, Jordan Peters says, and Tom Platt says, like, you need to be going to the gym nervous. You need to be worried. Like, I go to the gym now and I'm there like, I have to do how much weight for how many reps on deadlifts? Like, I'm thinking to myself, this is crazy. My back's going to definitely give out. I'm thinking, how am I going to row more than what I did this week? Like, this is a PR. This is a lifetime PR now we're getting close to on bent over rows. And I'm there like, there's no way I'm going to beat that. And then I have to, because otherwise I'm not going to make progress, The progress comes from beating the logbook and challenging yourself to greater levels of intensity, greater levels of muscle contraction, contracting your muscles against greater resistance over time, which actually takes a long time. So when, I was earlier on in the gym getting injured all the time, it's because I was rushing. I was putting on 5 kilo increments of weights, from session to session, week to week. I was putting on 10 kilo jumps of weight that just is unrealistic and unsustainable. And I was doing too much volume. I was training for too long. I wasn't eating enough. Like, of course I'm going to get injured. My recovery must have not been good enough. And, people say there's no such thing as overtraining. And if your recovery is good and you're progressively overloading, there is no such thing as overtraining. But clearly back in the day, I wasn't supporting everything with everything I could. I wasn't doing the best that I can. Right now, I don't even know if I'm doing everything perfectly, or if in 7 years' time I'm going to be able to look back and think, wow, the guy in 2025 was sure doing some weird stuff with carbs, considering, but it's just the way that you live and you learn. And now I know for, my goal of being an IFBB pro, hopefully one day, it's going to be a long time. It's not going to be a case of just, oh yeah, I'll do a prep and I'll, win a qualifier and I'll win a national and that'll be that. I got a lot to do. I got a lot of doing to do. I got a lot of learning to do. I got a lot of reading to do. I got a lot of lifting to do. I got a great deal of progressively overloading to do, because weight is weight, and size does move weights. And if I look at the weights that the pros are moving on the movements that they're doing, I'm still a little peon. I'm still weak. I see them doing RDLs with 220, 240. I see them doing deadlifts with 240, 260. I see them doing bent over rows with 180. Machines are getting stacked with 220 kilos on each gym pin. That's not happening for me yet. I'll know when I'm ready, when people look at me and they're like, asking like, how's that possible? The weights, how are you lifting that? The look, how are you achieving that? The leanness, how's that possible? I'm not there yet, and it would be remiss to rush into competing when I know that I'm not ready. I feel like rushing to lift more weight to get to those weights would only lead in, destruction and injury of myself. It wouldn't, I've got 5 weeks left of this cut. I'm going to try and grow for a whole year in a row, hopefully. Maybe I'll need to put a cut through it somewhere in the middle there. So it might be 20 weeks of growing, 12 weeks of cutting, 20 weeks of growing for next year. So I'll be growing for 40 weeks and cutting for 12. I feel like that's close enough to a 4-to-1 ratio of gaining to losing, where I should, even if I lose a bit of tissue on the cut, I should lose lots of fat on the cut. I should make up for it on both sides of the gain. So I just need to keep on keeping on. I'm happy with the before and after, the picture of the thumbnail. That's made me quite chuffed, to be fair. But I'm also, at the same time, I'm going to level with you. I'm not happy with the way I look yet, if that makes sense. I still can see details in my physique, in my body, things that I want to change, that I know I can change, that I will have to change in order to win a pro card, in order to have a pro physique. Because it's not really, the pro card, you could win that and it wouldn't mean anything if you didn't have a pro level physique or the physique you wanted. If it's not about winning, it's about having the physique of the person who's able to win. Because you could probably, I don't know how likely or unlikely it is, but you could probably fall into favorable terms that mean that you win, but you might not necessarily have the ultimate physique that you want, if that makes any sense. But it's more about what I have and then presenting that, as opposed to just going for gold. I've got definite development left to do on my legs, my calves, my hamstrings, adductors, these bits on the inside. I just injured them, so they've got some growing to do left. The quads, the sweep on the outside isn't there yet. It's not perfect there yet. The teardrops, they've got way more space to grow. If I were to take the pictures I've got from the photo shoot and I were to pay somebody to Photoshop them, let's say, for example, I was to say, edit these pictures to make this guy look more muscular, where would they put the muscle? With the, where would they liquefy and spread it out to make the physique look better, is sort of what my thinking was. Obviously they could make you look leaner. I can get leaner by just cutting. So where would they actually put the tissue? Where does the tissue need to go? Well, obviously wider shoulders would make my waist look narrower. Bigger forearms would make my waist look narrower. Bigger arms would make my waist look narrower. I can't narrow my waist really. So even if in Photoshop you could do that, that's not possible to take tissue away like that. But if you were to think where they would add it, if you added it on the outside of my quads, that would make my waist look narrower. If you added it on my calves, that would somehow, I feel like that would make my waist look narrower. My neck, my traps, there's loads of places that muscle can go. Mainly the shoulders and the arms, I feel like. Shoulders and arms have so much room to improve. Everywhere's got room to improve, But in terms of like weaknesses, I feel like I need to address my lacking arms, my lacking biceps, triceps, forearms, shoulders, calves, hamstrings. I'm quite happy with my back development. I feel like I've got a bit of width from the back poses. I don't know if it translates into the front poses, like a front lat spread and a front bicep. So maybe bring the lats round on the front, but I just think that means grow your lats even more. Like all of the muscles need to grow. It's going to be quite balanced. I feel like the gaining that I'm going to do, I'm not going to need to do like a super focused split on any one thing anymore. But I do think it needs to be like legs are the priority, then it's arms, then it's shoulders, and then everything else kind of falls into place. So that's why I'm thinking split wise for next year after I finish my cut and I start growing again, which will be either late this year or early next year. I'll start growing again, or I'll start trying to push the food up and push the weights back up. I'm still trying to push weights up, but I'm on a cut, so it's just like it's pretty hard to balance it all out. But the split will be definitely something like I'm thinking 6 days a week, one rest day, because push pull legs has worked really well. The 6 days a week, one rest day, but then I'm going to be working a lot more. I'm going to be spending a lot more time at work as well, so I might have to go down to a 5 day a week split. But I was thinking upper lower, upper lower, upper lower rest. I know 3 lots of upper lower A, upper lower B, upper lower C, and that was going to be like one upper day is focused on chest, one upper day is focused on shoulders and arms, one upper day is focused on back. But then I'd also do shoulders and arms on all 3 of the upper days, but just one of the days would be more shoulders and arms, one of the days would be more back, one of the days would be more chest. And then on the lower days, obviously I'd do one day which is for the quads, one day which is for the hamstrings, and then one day which is for all the accessory stuff like the glutes, the calves, the adductors. But I'd also train glutes and calves and adductors on the quads and hamstrings day. If you get what I mean, I'd sort of be doing like 2 of the upper days and lower days would be specific to the quads, the hamstrings, the chest and the back, but then they'd have the ancillaries of the shoulders and the arms and the adductors and the calves and the glutes. But then they'd also, those adductors, calves, glutes, shoulders and arms would have their own days to get a little bit extra in, because that way the frequency of those muscles would be 3 times a week, which would be up from what they are now with 2 times a week. And frequency is clearly a very important factor in building muscle. As time goes on, it looks like the full body every other day. The fact that you do end up training everything 3.5 times a week is pretty important for growth over time, over a long period of time. And upper lower splits, the fact you train everything 3 times a week is clearly very beneficial to getting this sort of progress. So the frequency is something I need to look at optimizing in a way where it doesn't interfere with the recovery of everything, but I still get to train everything more frequently, but a little bit less maybe in terms of the volume of those sessions. So in terms of the amount of exercises and the amount of sets I do for each thing, it might be a little bit less. There might only be 2 exercises for back on some days as opposed to 3. There might only be 1 exercise on chest as opposed to 2, but it will be far more frequent. So if you to add it up and tally up the overall volume, it would be pretty similar, pretty close in terms of volume. The intensity and the effort would always be there, obviously, but then the frequency would just be up, so there'd be more opportunities for growth and progress, if that makes any sense. Because if you're beating the logbook Monday to Monday, but you're doing it Monday, so you say you're progressing your chest every Monday and Thursday, that's 2 times a week. But if you're progressing your chest movements Monday, Wednesday, and Friday, that's now 3 times a week. So that's a whole 33% more, or 50% more, really, isn't it? The difference is 50%. It's a 50% increase in frequency from 2 to 3. It's a 33% downwards the other way, but it's a 50% increase in frequency. So if you could progress your chest 3 times a week as opposed to 2, that would, over time, that would add up. And if you could progress your chest, 3.5 times as opposed to 3, that would over time do it. If you could somehow train chest 7 days a week and progress on every single movement in those different ways. But I can imagine the recovery then is where you run into problems, and you're just, you're training with a sore chest. So in all of those instances, it would be suboptimal. But I feel like the upper lower A, upper lower B, upper lower C is where I'm going to have to try and put a lot of thought and time into making it perfect for me and what I need out of it. But it is going to be an upper low split that I move to finally. So just wrap the video up. The transformation is done. The 7 years and change, and now I'm gonna keep looking back and learning from what's in this big old binder. You could get a workout with that in if you have a look. That's some history in there. That's a lot of love, and I mean it's a lot of love for the gym, really, isn't it? It's clearly an obsession. It's clearly a passion. It's clearly something I'm not going to stop anytime soon. So if you just stay put, stay focused, stay watching, like, comment, subscribe, you'll get to see where we can take things from here. Go and make a transformation just as drastic as 50 to 105 kilos. We'll go from 105 all the way to 155 maybe. You never know. But if I keep on working and I keep on growing and I keep on learning to grow, I don't see why not. So that's where we'll leave it. If you've enjoyed it, like, comment, subscribe, share, and I'll see you guys all around. Take care.